Hello, my name's Kaylee and these are my books. So today's video is my favorite video to make, and that is my TBR game for the month of October. My TBR game is called TBRLAND, and it is a TBR game based off of Candyland. Now, for October, I already have a large TBR, and that is from a video where I made a TBR for 3 different readathons I'm participating in. I will link that video down below because there are already 18 books on my TBR for October. Quite a lot. And those are my priority books. So those are the books that I will be reading first. However, I do read typically anywhere from 25 to 30 books a month. So I can add more books to my TBR. And since I have so much fun playing my TBR game, I figured I would also still do my monthly TBR game this month. So I am going to cut to me playing my game. First card pull, 1 green. So we landed on a horror book. So the first card pull landed me on horror, which is perfect for October, and I chose Echo for this prompt. Echo is actually the Pyramid Book Club's October choice, which is perfect because I love reading along with them. I don't know much about this book other than that it's about this man who goes hiking in the wilderness and potentially starts to lose his mind. I could be off. I don't really want to read the synopsis. I'm sorry. I love going into horror books not knowing anything. But the Pyramid Book Club, like I said, will be reading this for October. They have a live show. They have reading sprints dedicated to this book. And the information for the Pyramid Book Club will be linked below. But it's run by Lexi, Michelle, and Monica. Second card pull, 1 green. And actually, because we landed on this horror book, we have the alien bridge we can go up. So we're going up here, bypassing this whole area into an epic fantasy. Okay, so my next pull is actually super nice because I landed on that alien bridge on the first pull. I was able to bypass a large section of my board, which works out well since there's already 18 books on the TBR, you know. And I landed on epic fantasy. And for epic fantasy, I will be reading The Shadow of What Was Lost, and this is another perfect pick for me because this is a book club pick for the Backlist book club, which is run by Cassidy and Mel and Bex, and their information and channels will be linked below. But excitingly, I am a guest host for this trilogy. So we will be reading this trilogy. Technically, this was the book for September and October, but obviously I didn't read it in September, so I have to read it in October, and we will be having a live show sometime in early November to discuss this book. So if you're interested in reading this book, go ahead and read it in October along with us and come to the live show. I've heard a lot of good things about this epic fantasy. It's just your classic forbidden powers, godlike magic, multiple point of view, everything I love in an epic fantasy. I'm excited to read this. And if you're afraid of the size, because it is chunky, I mean, let's get a page count. Actually, it's not as long as I thought. It's about just under 700 pages. It's 693. I was gonna guess like 1,000 pages based on how chunky it is. It must have a bit like thicker paper or something. I mean, 700 is still long, but not as long as I thought for epic fantasy. But if 700 pages intimidates you, I have been told that this book is a very easy book to get into for epic fantasy. And this is a book that actually in Barnes & Noble, I got an in real life recommendation for. Some man in the fantasy section just came up to me and grabbed this book and was like, "You need to read this." I was like, okay, and that's the day I bought this book. So I'm excited to see if that random man was correct. I moved the board down a little bit, but let's do our third card pull. 1 blue. So we're moving up into a sci-fi. So the next card pull chose a science fiction book, and for that I chose this bind up of novellas. And you might be saying, man, you're choosing a lot of chunky books for someone with already quite a few books on your TBR, and you would be correct. I mean, this is another book that's almost 700 pages. But I'm going to call it a win if I read one of the novellas in here, because this is a bind up of multiple novellas all set in the Skyward universe, and that is a YA science fiction series that Brandon Sanderson writes. I really like this series. I have not read the 3rd one in the series, but I want to read the novellas before I read the 3rd one, so I need to get going with the novellas. And so technically I'm putting 1 novella on my TBR, but if I love them, we might end up reading the whole thing. We'll see. Let's see what the name of the first novella is. So technically only officially Sunreach is on my TBR. Next card pull. 2 greens. So skipping this first green, going into a random fantasy or sci-fi. So the next prompt we landed on was random in the fantasy and science fiction section of the board, which means a randomly generated fantasy or science fiction book. I did this based off of the books that I own. So basically I did each shelf on my TBR bookshelf as a random number, chose a shelf, and then I did each fantasy or science fiction book on that shelf as a random number and chose a book. And based off of that process, it chose a memory called Empire. I've heard so many good things about this book, and I know it is a political space opera book with a bit of a murder mystery element. I already own the sequel to this book. I believe it's a duology, so I own both the books in the duology, so I'm really hoping I like this one. That way I didn't screw myself over by already buying the sequel. Next card pull. 2 pinks. So I'm gonna move the board down a little bit so you can see it a bit better, but we are skipping past this first pink and moving into the second pink, which is a Mafia Romance. The next prompt we landed on was a Mafia Romance book, and so for this prompt, I'm choosing the next book in the Brutal Birthright series because I recently read Brutal Prince by Sophie Lark and loved it, and Sophie Lark has a huge backlist of Mafia Romance that I'm trying to work through, so I'm excited to be able to read book 2 in the Brutal Birthright series titled Stolen Heir. Next card pull. 1 purple, so we're moving into the serial killer or kidnapping romance. The next prompt I landed on is serial killer or kidnapping romance. And in September, I actually read There Are No Saints by Sophie Lark. Well, spoiler alert, I haven't read it yet, but I am reading it today. And I know it's also a duology, and the second book in this duology is called There Is No Devil. And so I figured, perfect, I could put There Is No Devil on my October TBR and finish up the duology. I do know that a lot of people dislike There Are No Devil, and a lot of people say like just treat There Are No Saints as a standalone, but I'm still gonna give the book 2 a go, and if I don't like book 2, then in my mind I will just erase it and pretend like There Are No Saints is a standalone. And next card pull. 1 blue, a fantasy romance. Next, I landed on a fantasy romance, and so for this, I am choosing Glow by Raven Kennedy. This is the last book in the Plated Prisoner series that is out. It is not the last book in the series, but once I read Glow, I will be caught up, which is very exciting. I really, really love this series. It's kind of like a dark King Midas retelling. Check trigger warnings because it's super dark. I mean, check trigger warnings about any of these dark romances I've been talking about. I'm totally invested in the story. I don't know how I've gone this long without reading Glow because it's been like 2 months since I read book 3, and the ending to book 3 is incredible, like so good, and I wanted to pick up Glow right away and then I just didn't. So I'm excited. October is the month to read it. Next card pull, 2 blues, which brings us past this 400-page one and into a mood read. And last but not least, we landed on mood read. Now, I don't always give myself options for the mood read. Sometimes I don't even say anything about the mood read in these videos because mood read really is just leaves it open, leaves an option for me to read whatever I want. But I just wanted to show off these 3 books because they're books I recently purchased that I've really been wanting to read, so they're high contenders for the mood read. First of which is The Last Housewife, and then we have Hidden Pictures, both of which would be great for October because they're both very dark thrillers, I think, that verge on horror. And I also have Babel, which I absolutely love the Poppy War trilogy, and this is R.F. Kuang's newest book, and it's like a dark academia vibe, so it could also be really fun for October. These are all like my most recent book purchases too, so it'd be nice to read a book that has current and relevant hype around it. So my game was actually really nice to me this month. It only has 7 books that it chose, along with book 8 being a mood read, which puts my grand total for my October TBR up to 25 assigned books, 26 books if you count the mood read. I think that's totally doable. I'm hoping I'm able to get through all of the books. But as I said, my readathon TBR is my top priority. That's what I will be completing first. So if you want to see what other 18 books are on my TBR, you can check out the video linked below. As a little spoiler, I am participating in Halloween, Blackoweenathon, and Stabathon, so the books are all for prompts in those readathons. Let me know what you're planning on reading in October, if you're doing full spooky books, or if you're just doing a couple spooky books, or if you're just doing your normal type of books. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave me a like and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you next time. Bye!